Hey everybody, it's Safi and Marco Dish Out on Movies, the only movie review show on YouTube to review movies in terms of food. It's just Marco here once again, and I am here today to review a Paul Newman classic. And I am reviewing The Hustler. I might be a bit biased against this movie because I did see the Twilight Zone episode that was inspired off of it as a kid. It was actually one of my favorite episodes, or I guess it still is one of my favorite episodes. I mean, it's always been. I've always felt that that was like an underrated episode, and that a lot of people they kind of, I don't know, like it's just because a lot of the episode is just this game of pool. I mean, that's what the episode's called, after all. And but I really enjoyed that episode, and I was curious to see what the original inspiration for it was like. And I was curious to also see, in general, like a good classic movie, because I'm going to have to watch the Minecraft movie, which is a modern crap movie. And I really get sick and tired of just watching nothing but crap. Nothing but modern crap. You know, I don't like giving bad reviews. And I don't like, constantly having to say, oh, that's another worst movie of the year. The movies just keep getting worse and worse and worse. I don't like to do that type of thing. I don't. But it happens. And luckily, I'm not going to give this movie a bad review. I'm going to give it a pretty good review. I would say overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. There were some issues that I had with it, but I would say that some of my bigger issues, they got lesser and lesser as the movie went along, because I was able to see the big picture by the end and see like how impactful the whole journey was, as opposed to just being like, oh, what's going to happen now? What's going to happen now? So this movie is all about this guy named Fast Eddie, and he's a pool hustler, and he's made a lot of money doing this hustling business, and he travels to this city to fight, or I mean not fight, to play a pool game with the legendary, and I'm reading the synopsis, the legendary Minnesota Fats, who is played by Jackie Gleason. And I'm just going to break it down because there's quite a few things to talk about, and the movie is kind of broken up into different sections. So let's break it down. First off, I want to talk about all the characters. I thought that Paul Newman was okay in this movie. I felt like there was a certain percentage of it where it was very much just focused on this relationship between him and this love interest that he meets. I can't even remember her name. Sarah. Yeah, Sarah. He was for a lot of the movie, it was focused on that, and he was kind of like this strange, like, silent character for this big portion of the movie, where he's just like kind of, chasing after this girl. And the whole thing about, he's basically caricaturized as being mean and lean and being like really hungry to win. And you don't really see a lot of that after the first hour of the movie. By the end of the movie, it's like there is a little bit of that, and especially in the final sequence where he has the last couple of games. But other than that, I thought that this Paul Newman performance was not as good as the one that I saw in Cool Hand Luke, although I thought he did a really good job. And, even though he's like this handsome, and I know I just said he's handsome leading man, even though he's like just this handsome leading man, he's really good at playing different characters. Like, he's not just like a pretty guy, and you see a lot nowadays, The Rock, people like him who just, they can't act at all, and they're always the same character. But you can clearly distinguish Luke from Cool Hand Luke and Eddie from The Hustler. And so on that front, he did a good job. Number two, I should talk about the quote-unquote villain of the movie. He's kind of like the fake villain. There's this Minnesota Fats he's not really the villain of the movie. The real villain is this other guy that we'll talk about pretty soon. But I thought that Jackie Gleason did a really good job, but again, I felt like he needed more, and I felt like he needed, like, I didn't really know very much about his character by the end of the movie, other than, you know, he's a respectful guy. He's very much like a legend, you know, like that typical, like, you know, it speaks for itself. Like, he's just that guy. He's the guy that you have to beat. And I guess that was the point. And that's what I think that this movie really tried to do, that was kind of hard for me a little bit, was that it tried to have actions and characters speak for themselves. So, like, Minnesota Fats, he doesn't get a lot of dialogue through the movie. In fact, it's kind of strange to me because, you know, the Twilight Zone episode, it's like a constant back and forth between these two characters. And it was really enjoyable on that front. But in this movie, you know, Minnesota Fats, he hardly ever, he hardly says a word through the whole movie. And at the end of the movie, it's like this montage of him giving looks and glances and exchanges, just like looking like, oh no, oh. But still, I thought he did a really good job. I would say a surprise factor of the movie was the love interest, which was Piper Laurie. I have never seen her when she was this young before. I've only ever seen her when she was in Carrie and Twin Peaks. I thought that she was really good because what I really liked about this movie was how different it was from Rocky. It felt a lot like Rocky, but a darker, different version. And it's funny because, you know, Rocky was made in the 70s. You know, you associate the 70s with, like, having grittier, darker movies with darker endings. And yet this movie is way darker than Rocky. It's way sadder than Rocky. And it takes a lot more chances. I mean, this love interest, she's far from perfect. She's depressed. She's kind of, I think she's like bipolar because she has this strange like mood disorder where she goes up and down and up and down. And she doesn't talk a lot too. Like, there's a lot of the times in the movie where it just feels like she's letting stuff happen and she's just not really fighting anything, and she's just kind of like being this victim in a way where it's tragic. It's like you want her to step up for herself. Like, they even had the classic old movie thing where the guy slaps the girl. You know, Paul Newman slaps her at one point, and she did take it like a badass, though. She was like, "Are you done?" She's like, "You think I'm gonna cry?" And he's like, "Shit." Like, I didn't expect this. I thought she's gonna be like how the 1960s actresses are, where they're just like, "Ooh, oh no, ooh, ooh." You know, like the women in Casino Royale with the James Bond parody. But anyways, I thought her character, she was really, really good. And even though I wasn't a huge fan of the romance, I did like it more as the movie went along because, again, a lot of the movie needed more dialogue, I think. A lot of the movie was very quiet. And there was even like a lack of music in certain areas. Like the final games of pool, there's like this slow jazz song that's playing in the background while this climactic match is happening. And it's like, why are you playing this like slow, kind of relaxed like jazz music? You should be playing like some intense like music here. But like, yeah, I loved her character. I thought she did a really good job. Definitely. And also too, I think a much more interesting love interest than a lot of the love interests that I see nowadays. You know, just the fact that she's not perfect. Like, you know, whenever people nowadays talk about the 60s, they're like, oh my God, women were all like, they were all like perfect or something. It was like they were all like forced to being perfect, and they couldn't have anything wrong with them because the patriarchy, but it's like, this movie, like, her character is a disaster. She is a disaster of a person. And to be honest, like, she felt like a modern character. So I'm really surprised just in general that, like, she was as flawed as she was. And so I love that. In fact, I love that a lot of the characters in the movie are flawed. You know, there's not a lot of... I mean, I don't really think there's a single, like, fully good character in this movie. Maybe one or two, but, like, every character has flaws. And so I really like that. George C. Scott plays the villain of the movie, in my opinion. He is the sleaziest piece of shit in the world in this movie. He plays this guy who basically, I don't know what you call him. I don't know, like, the technical terms, like, you know, like, I didn't even know, like, what... I didn't even know, like, that there's such a thing as a pool hustler. I've heard of a pool shark before, and I've heard of the word shark, but not a hustler. So, this guy, though, he basically finds people and backs them and gives them money. He's kind of like the, I guess you call him the bank. And so, in the beginning of the movie, he actually backs Minnesota Fats, and he just has this presence where it's like you want to know more about him, and even without saying a word, I think that out of all the actors in the movie, he did the best job, because the movie was all about being quiet, characters just being the characters and not having to speak all this dialogue. And I think that he was the actor who really brought that to the table, you know, to where you knew his character even without him talking, whereas the other characters, they kind of struggle with that a little bit in comparison. And probably one of my favorite parts of the movie is that Paul Newman is playing pool. Well, he's playing pool, but he's shooting pool. But he gets really bothered because George C. Scott is just sitting there, and he hasn't moved for like hours and hours and hours. And he's like, "Can you move? It's really worrying me and bothering me that you're just sitting there." And so then George C. Scott, he gets up, he moves his chair a little tiny bit to the right, and then he sits back down. And it's like, that was so good. That was so genius. And then in the second half of the movie, he approaches Eddie, the main character, and he offers to stake him and to give him money to play pool and to raise the money to play Minnesota Fats, and then to help him play Minnesota Fats at the end. So he's kind of like Mickey from Rocky, if Mickey was an evil piece of shit. And so once again, talking about how 60s movie were so light and 70s movie were so dark, this is another example where the hustler out-darked Rocky, and you had this Mickey character who's just a completely awful human being. I mean, I don't know what happened with him and Eddie's girlfriend. It was like he was coming on to her, and like he expected her to be intimate with him since he was staking Eddie. I thought that was really bizarre, and it really made me uncomfortable, because up to this point, she was the type of person to just do whatever she was told. And they actually did end up kissing, and then she kills herself. Spoiler alert. But that whole series of events was really, really horrible and awful. The thing that really bothered me, too, is at the end, spoiler alert, because I'm spoiling the whole movie because I need to talk about all of it. But at the end, Eddie wins, and he destroys Fats. I mean, he wrecks him to the point of where they basically hardly even show the whole game. I mean, they only show, like, he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna fuck this guy's shit up, and then he boom, 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 and then it's just shots of Fats going like, wow. It's like he's not even saying anything, and then boom, he won. The thing that bothers me, though, is that Eddie, he did not want to work with, well, he attacked George C. Scott after the girlfriend committed suicide because he knew that George C. Scott had something to do with it. So what really bothers me is that after he beats Fats, George C. Scott is such a piece of shit. He didn't give any money to Paul at all. He didn't give him any money to give to Fats. He gave him his own money that he earned. That was his part of the deal from the money that they won in Kentucky to play Fats. That was his money. That was his little bit of money. And yet, at the very end, he's like, time for you to give me my cut. And oh yeah, I don't just want this little percent. I want 50%. I want half of it. Or no, he wanted 75 at first, and then he wanted 50. So that was less, actually. And then he kept decreasing it. And Eddie was just like, fuck you. Like, what right do you have? Like, you did not even give me any money. You wouldn't even help me. I had to give him all my own money. He gave Fats every last cent that he had to play him at the end. That was all his. So George C. Scott's character had no right asking him for anything. But the ending, it really exposed that character as the main villain of the movie to the point of where he was threatening Eddie, and he was saying, like, okay, we're going to break your thumbs. We're going to break your arm. And then Eddie's like, oh, well, you know what I'm going to do? After you do all that, I'm going to come back in here when I'm better, and I'm going to kill you. I mean, that was badass. That was probably another favorite part of the movie. He's like, oh, okay, you're going to do all that stuff? Well, I'm going to come back and kill you. It's like, I believed it, too. I believed that he would have come back in there. He would have shoved that pool stick right up George C. Scott's you-know-what. He would have impaled him with it. I mean, he was pissed at this guy. So, yeah. Yeah, this is a fun movie to talk about, too. Lots of interesting things. Speaking of interesting things, another character who he's actually like the good mentor and partner. Eddie had this partner who he traveled around with, and he was present with Eddie for the first half of the movie, but then he basically ended up losing faith in him. And that's what I found really, really cool about this movie, was the fact that it felt like nobody in the movie believed in this guy. Nobody. His mentor, he gave up on him. His partner gave up on him. George C. Scott gave up on him at the end. His girlfriend killed herself, so that's even worse. But I mean, I don't think that she didn't believe in him, but she was kind of like tired of him because she knew that, like, at one point she called him a loser, and she said, like, what's going to happen after the money runs out and all that. But like, it just felt like nobody believed in him. And it's just totally, totally different from Rocky, where it's like, oh, he's the everyman. Everyone's rooting for him. Everyone wants him to win. You want him to win. Whereas this character, nobody in the movie wants him to win. Nobody. People hate him. There's a part in the movie, probably another favorite part of the movie, where everyone knows him now because he played Fats. So he can't really do his normal pool shark thing anymore. He can't really do that because people already know who he is. But he goes to this pool hall anyway to try to scam these people, and they end up breaking his thumbs, and that was really dark. And it was like, this movie, it's like everyone and everything is against this guy. Everyone And that's another thing. People talk about like, oh, like, back then, they'd have these male characters and they faced no adversity. And, so nowadays, like, it's totally fine. We should have these female characters who can just get away with anything and do whatever they want. But you look at a movie like this guy went through hell. This character went through hell to win at the end. And even at the end of the movie, what George C. Scott ended up doing was he said, okay, you can take all the money, but you better never step foot in a big pool hall again. So basically threatened him with death, I guess. And I thought, like, that's such a dark but awesome ending, because it's like, this guy who had everything and everyone against him, he won because of the belief in himself. And he managed to accomplish what he accomplished because of the belief that he had. And that's what happened at the very end. They started playing together, and he was like, George C. Scott tells me, and I know that his name in the movie is like Bert or something, but I don't think that he looks like a Bert. He looks like a butthead. That's what he looks like. But he's like, you told me to, play it safe and, play it slow. And he's like, fuck that. And he just goes, bam, 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 bam. And he just like, it was amazing. These shots that he did, a lot of them were close-up shots. So that somebody else shot those shots for him. He did not shoot those shots himself. But then there were others where they did show him shooting, and he did a really good job. Now, another thing I loved about the movie, this is something that I've had trouble with nowadays. A lot of people, I get it, like, people see modern movies and they see modern shows and they think, oh, well, things have to be done a certain way or else you're not making a real movie. And a real movie has to be made this way. And only in real movies do they do this or they don't do that. The thing is, I've had a lot of trouble with cinematography. Well, I don't have trouble personally, but a lot of people, they have had a problem with me to where I want to shoot a shot and I leave what's called headroom, a lot of headroom. To me, it's kind of like a narcissism thing with these people because it's like, oh my God, I need my face to be in 100% of the frame at all times or else the movie is going to die. I'm going to die. And it's like, you think about these amazing shots that you can get. You don't always have to be center frame, center focus, and have just your head in the center frame. That's not always the greatest choice. And so I do a lot of shots to where there are these wide shots where you can see like an entire room or an entire interaction, or you can see an entire person's frame. Or let's say like you just see a person's head in the corner and then the rest of it is like blank space to where it's like it says something sometimes. And obviously you don't do that all the time. But it seems like people nowadays, they can't handle it. They can't comprehend it. It really, really aggravates them and makes them think that, like, I don't know. It's really weird. Sometimes you just have to trust the vision. And then you have to, because there's always room for reshoots. That's another thing. There's always room to fix mistakes if there are. But the reason why I'm saying this is because I was surprised at the amount of wide shots they had in this movie. Just these beautiful wide shots. These shots where the people would be at the edges of the frames, and it was so imperfect because it's like, why is it that like they were able to do this all the time back then in these classic movies? Nobody had a problem with it. But then when I'm doing the same thing, people are like, there's too much headroom in your shots. Oh my God, there's so much headroom oh no, we're all gonna die. Headroom. And I'm like, I don't know. It's like, fuck this shit. Actually, this movie really inspired me because of that. Because I was like, am I crazy? Or, but this movie, it has a ton of headroom in a lot of scenes. There's these scenes where they're shooting pool, and there are these epic shots. Like the very last shot of the movie is just this wide shot of the pool hall. And Eddie leaves, and then all the other characters leave. Fats leaves, but then George C. Scott is just sitting there like this piece of shit, this slimy, sleazy piece of shit. So yeah, that's something I wanted to say, because I thought I was going crazy. I thought like, wow, I'm doing these shots, and it's not like the shots don't have purposes for being that way. They do. And that's the point. I was like, I'm going crazy here, because these shots are perfect for what's going on here, and I'm being treated like I'm doing something amateurish and wrong. And it's like, I don't think so anymore after seeing this movie. I think that I've been right on the ball. Another thing is, I will say this. The movie started to have a tendency to not show things. Because, for the first 40 minutes of the movie, it's basically one long pool match between him and Fats. And it is grueling. It is so exhausting. And it really makes you feel like you're there. They spent like over 24 plus hours playing pool nonstop. And it was like a nightmare. It was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm here, and I feel like I'm Paul Newman's character, and I'm just exhausted. And I'm so disoriented, and I just didn't know what was going to happen. I was like, shit, because what happened was, he beat Fats so badly, he got $12,000 to $18,000, and then he started getting drunk. And so Fats was like, basically he said, I'm not going to stop playing until Fats says it's over. And Fats was like, oh, really? He didn't say anything, though. And that's what really surprised me. He was like this silent, badass villain. And so he ended up winning all of Eddie's money back, plus extra. That was just brutal. It was brutal. But it felt like this was needed so that the match at the end can be earned, And then we see a match between Eddie and this Kentucky guy where instead of playing pool, they're playing billiards. I don't really know the difference between pool and billiards. Like, or at least maybe I just can't think about it off the top of my head. But they don't even show that. They don't even show it at all. And that you just see the aftermath of it. First he loses a bunch. And you're like, oh no. And then they're like, okay, let's play. And then he wins, but you don't see that. You just see the aftermath of like, and I will give them credit. That was the one part where I thought it was okay to not show the game, because it's almost like, okay, this guy, Eddie, he is so good. You don't even have to show him winning. You don't even have to show them playing, because he is that good. But then, this was where it ticked me off. At the end, when he does the match against Fats, the final match, he does go through this monologue, which is probably one of my favorite parts. I think I already said one of my favorite parts of the movie. And he just goes bam, 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 bam. He gets all these shots in a row, and people are really, really impressed. But they don't show any back and forth. Like they just rush through it, and they just show like basically a montage of Jackie Gleason's face looking sadly at the camera. And then boom, he's won. That really kind of disappointed me, because I was like, I would have at least liked to have seen a little bit more of that final match, because I felt like it was earned And that's another thing, is that this is probably the most earned feeling that I felt of like a final match in movie history. I'm talking sports of all kinds. All these different movies like Rocky, Bleed for this, which I think is underrated. I think it's actually better than Rocky as well. But that's a different day. Warrior, baseball movies, football movies. This last match in The Hustler, I wanted him to win so badly, and I wanted to see that match so badly, but all we got was just that little bit with Eddie going through the monologue, and basically there was no contest there. He was on fire. So yeah, I really like this movie. Again, I do have a couple of issues with it that I already talked about throughout this review, but I would highly recommend this movie. I would just say that if you're accustomed to only watching like more modern-ish movies, you need to prepare yourself for how slow and quiet this movie is, because I will admit, as perfect as I am, quote unquote, I am not perfect. And in the middle of this movie, I was really bored, and I was almost going to give up on the movie. I was like, when's this movie going to finally, get going? And, but I think it's that slowness that really, really worked well for this movie. And I'm also curious to see Color of Money, because I did not know that was like a sequel to this movie. I was like, wow, are you serious? Like, that sounds interesting. Like, I would actually like to see that now. The poster always looked kind of gay to me, too. It's not a very good poster, that Color of Money poster. But anyways, in terms of food, this movie, last week I had, the week before last, I had dental work done. And it was just a lot of work, and my mouth was very, very sore. I was having problems with the temporary crown, and I'm still having issues adjusting to the permanent one. And so my friend Vicious Swa, he invited me to go over with him and his friends and celebrate his birthday at this restaurant called Club Ocean O. And I ended up deciding to go, and I was really anxious because, I wasn't feeling well, but then I felt really good as soon as we started getting some food, and it just felt like, I tried a lot of things throughout that night, like people got stuff like appetizers, and I tried like a bite of this and a bite of that. And that I really enjoyed that dinner, because it was just like a constant barrage of food. And it was just a constant barrage of like good food. This kind of fancy, expensive restaurant. And I ended up getting crab stuffed salmon with mashed potatoes and béarnaise sauce. They had this really good bread with this butter that was fantastic. I had calamari, I had ahi tuna, I had more crab, I had this really interesting cocktail, and it just was like a really, really good dinner, really, really good evening. And I was just really kind of up in the air about going at first because of not feeling well. The night before, I had a really bad mouth ache, and I didn't get very much sleep. And so I was not really sure about going, and I was so glad that I ended up going, and that I got to try all that great food and everything. And so that's what this movie felt like for me. It felt like a meal that like or a movie that you're just so thankful that you gave a chance on and just sat through it and let the movie happen. I think that's another thing that sets movies apart, movies from back then versus movies today, is that nowadays people decide what they think about a movie in the first 10 minutes. And they say that. But movies back then, you know, the audiences, they were respectful, and they let the movie take the time to tell the story that they needed to tell. And so movies back then, they got somewhere. They had a point. They thought about the big picture. Whereas movies nowadays, they're all about fulfilling quotas. They're about appealing to the four quadrants. And they're about hooking you in with whatever. And then the rest of the movie, it's like, who cares? You know, like, oh, you saw the trailer, you're really excited, so now you're going to watch the whole movie because you like the trailer, you know, and, like, it feels like back then, like, people let the movies take their time. They let movies happen and just play out as they would play out, and so I want to watch more movies like this. And also, too, I want to watch this movie again, like, right now, just because of the shots. Because, again, like, I've had such a problem recently. Like, I've had, let's see, like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've had 5 people tell me off and on, like, why is there so much headroom? You have too much headroom in this shot. And I was like, at a certain point, I just completely broke down. And I was like, what is the deal with this headroom thing? What is the deal with, like, where did you learn that? Like, what dipshit taught you about this headroom business? Like, it's like, fuck you. You know, it's like, the shot's a shot. Like, every shot's different. You know, you have different kinds of shots. And so, like, again, this movie, it had a ton of wide shots. It had a ton of shots where characters were half on camera, not on camera. It did a great job, and it really, really, the cinematography of this movie was outstanding. But yeah, also, there was another controversy about this movie, by the way, before I go. I thought that this was very interesting. Every single actor in the movie was nominated, basically. Every single major one. But George C. Scott, he was so against the Oscars that he refused to be nominated. And I just thought that was so strange because he gave the best performance in the movie. You know, he's the one where I would be like, yeah, he deserves an Oscar for this shit. And then also Jackie Gleason, it's so funny because now I finally know Jackie Gleason. Like, whenever I think of Jackie Gleason, what do I think of? I think of Back to the Future. We're gonna watch Jackie Gleason while we eat. Well, wait a second. I've seen this before. It must be a rerun. So I finally get to see good old Jackie Gleason. I'd never seen him before in a movie, I think. I'd never seen him. I've never seen The Honeymooners show. So this is my first Jackie Gleason picture. So anyways, please like this video and comment. And then please subscribe to our channel if you'd like to see more honest movie reviews. And once again, tell me that I don't do any positive reviews after you listen to this video because you will be talking out of your ass. So goodbye, everybody. See you soon.